Carl Jung said something that most people completely miss: the loudest person in the room is almost never the most powerful one. In fact, Jung believed that the man who has mastered silence has mastered something most humans never will: himself. Silence is not weakness, it is the original display of dominance. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire on earth and wrote his deepest thoughts in a private journal never meant to be published. He didn't tweet his philosophy. He didn't perform his stoicism. He lived it in silence, and the results spoke across 2,000 years. When you speak constantly, you reveal your hand. You show people what triggers you, what you want, what you fear. Silence withholds that data. Jung called this the shadow, the unspoken interior life that gives a man his depth. The man who controls what he reveals controls the frame of every interaction he enters. The silent man forces others to project their own meaning onto him, and that projection is power. Think of the archetype of the fed-up empath who finally stops explaining himself. His co-workers, his family, his social circle, they all start filling in the blanks. Some assume he's calm. Some assume he's dangerous. Some assume he's wise. None of them are certain. And uncertainty, not information, is what generates respect. Jung called this process projection. When you give people nothing to react to, their own unconscious fills the void. You become a mirror. Mirrors don't get argued with, they just reflect. The man who talks less becomes the man others talk about. That's social gravity, and silence is what creates it. Constant talking is a symptom of an unintegrated ego. Silence is what integration looks like from the outside. Kierkegaard spent years in near total social isolation in Copenhagen. People thought he was broken. He was actually doing the hardest work a human being can do, confronting himself without distraction. What came out of that silence was some of the most penetrating psychological writing in Western history. He wasn't quiet because he had nothing to say. He was quiet because he was building something. Jung's concept of individuation, the process of becoming a whole, authentic self, requires sustained inner attention. You cannot hear yourself think when you are performing yourself for others. Every time you fill silence with noise, you are running from that process. The silent man isn't antisocial. He's doing the internal work that the loud man keeps postponing. Silence in conflict is the most underrated tactical weapon available to you. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who reacts emotionally to provocation gives his enemies a roadmap. History's most effective leaders, from Aurelius to Frankl in the concentration camps, understood that the man who chooses not to react holds all the leverage. Viktor Frankl, surrounded by unimaginable horror, wrote that the last human freedom is the ability to choose your response. Silence is that choice made visible. When someone provokes you and you respond immediately, you confirm that they have access to your nervous system. You have handed them a remote control. Silence breaks that circuit. It signals that the provocation did not land, or more accurately, that you have decided it will not control your next move. In negotiation, in argument, in conflict, the first person to fill silence with words has usually just lost. The introvert is not the man who has nothing to offer, he is the man who has learned that not everything needs to be offered. Schopenhauer argued that the amount of noise a man can tolerate is inversely proportional to his intelligence, not because quiet people are smarter, but because inner richness reduces the need for external stimulation. The self-sufficient man, the one who has built something real inside himself, does not need the room to validate him. He already knows what he knows. He speaks when it matters and goes quiet the rest of the time. That selectivity is what makes people lean in when he does speak. Jung identified the introvert not as someone who is shy or broken, but as someone whose energy flows inward rather than outward. In a culture that monetizes attention and rewards performance, this looks like weakness. It is actually a form of psychological sovereignty. You cannot manipulate a man who does not need your approval. You cannot rattle a man who is not performing for you. Silence is the outer expression of that inner independence. Here is what Jung understood that most men spend their entire lives missing. First, silence is not the absence of power, it is power in its most disciplined form. The man who controls what he reveals controls the dynamic. Second, the internal work, the confrontation with yourself, the integration of your shadow only happens in quiet. Every man who avoids silence is avoiding himself. And third, in a world that rewards noise, the man who chooses silence strategically becomes rare, and rare things are always valued. You do not need to be the loudest voice in the room. You need to be the one people are still thinking about when they get home. If this hit something real for you, subscribe. We drop one of these every Tuesday and Friday, no filler, no motivational fluff, just the ideas that actually change how you see yourself in the world. Hit the bell if you want it in your feed the moment it drops. See you Tuesday.